Alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. Brothers and sisters, thank you for joining us on this Monday evening. I know it's something different, but alhamdulillah, it's beautiful to have our brother Yusuf Ismail all the way from South Africa. And it's a very important time that we are facing at this particular moment, especially in this generation, me being over 50 now, and I've never experienced a world that has got so much troubles and tribulations amongst the Muslim nations and the people around the world, and the wars that have been started by people who are behind huge companies and organizations who make money from arm deals and all the production and industry of arms and so forth. So I guess it's in their interest to cause divisions and cause wars and destructions, and just to make an extra million or 2 million. But they don't seem to understand that in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that you will be questioned for that and you will be punished for that. And it's just, I'm really shocked. And recently, last week, as to say, this verdict that took place in The Hague, and I was a bit disappointed with it, to be honest. I really was. And I think Israel have got about a month or so to come back with some rules and regulations and how they will try their best, subhanAllah. Just for me to put it into words, I'm lost for words sometimes. Like the genocide, you can see it live on TV. You can see it on social media. You can see it. But yet they still need another month or so or whatever for them to kind of bring it onto the table and show the judges. And some of the judges themselves are linked with various governments and organizations. And it's very shocking. And to be honest, I am lost for words. I really am. And I'm sure Brother Yusuf is more eloquent than me and will be a bit more calmer than me. Yusuf, assalamu alaikum. I love the t-shirt, brother. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. No, I actually didn't realize this. I normally wear these as it's almost 9 o'clock here. So when I get to bed, I kind of wear something comfortable. And I didn't actually realize until now, or just about after, that I'm actually having a South African t-shirt, but it's appropriate for the particular moment. And indeed for the situation that we see ourselves around the world. And as you quite clearly pointed out, I mean, you are in your 50s, I'm 40. I mean, the world is changed. The world is certainly changing before our very eyes. We are seeing things that we've never seen. I mean, just a couple of years back, just within our time, three years, can't you believe how time flies? The entire world was shut down. I mean, who would have imagined something of this particular nature 20 years ago or 10 years ago, for that particular matter, where all of a sudden the entire world is shut down. There's a kind of a global lockdown, like an Orwellian society. So, this reminds me a lot of the fact that we are indeed living in what can be described as post-normal times. And you've got, someone within your country, someone who I highly admire, Professor Ziauddin Sadar, who is viewed as arguably the world's leading Muslim polymath, as he was described by The Guardian some years back. He's written a book on post-normal times, and indeed we find ourselves in post-normal times, in strange times. I mean, we are essentially living through history. I mean, we're living right now through history. What is taking place before us, the global lockdown that we experience, the application now, and the taking Israel for the very first time in human history to the International Court of Justice, and this application on the Convention for the Prevention and the Punishment of the Crime of Genocide in the Gaza Strip. This means, as many have pointed out, for the rest of human history, and I'm talking about 100 years from now, maybe 150 years from now, maybe 200 years from now, Israel's name, whatever the outcome of this application, Israel's name will forever be associated with genocide. It'll be viewed as a genocidal state. It'll be viewed as a state formed by means of ethnic cleansing and crimes against humanity. And I think that is indeed significant in relation to what you are saying. So let me just recap this position. And certainly I also echo some of the points that you made particularly a few moments ago, in relation to how you viewed the judgment, and possibly a disappointment in relation to what happened, and of course the outcome. But let's put this in perspective. On the 29th of December 2023, last year, those who are not familiar with this, the South African government, my government, which has no, what's a word to use? It's not a runner in the race. It's not a horse in the race. It's not a party to the entire conflict itself. The only similarity between South Africa and Israel, one could make the analogy today, and I say this with boldness and confidence, was that South Africa was once upon a time the pariah of the world. South Africa was once upon a time the polecat of the world. South Africa was an apartheid state. And today, in the world today, we have a situation where for the first time in history, regardless of what the United States government states, regardless of what your government, or at least your regime, the UK regime, says, because I know the vast majority of British people stand on the right side of history, despite all what many Western governments say, Israel is indeed and has become the polecat of the world. It has become the pariah of the world. It has become the last remaining colonial settler colony in the world. It's the last existing apartheid state in the world. So what happened is that South Africa, which had no role to play in the race, had nothing to do with the matter insofar as a conflict existing between the Palestinians and Israel is concerned. On the 29th of December 2023, they proceeded to approach the ICJ, that's the International Court of Justice. And if I showed the brothers the last time, they came up with an 84-page document. This 84-page document can be downloaded. I don't know if it's up on the last YouTube stream, but it's an 84-page document, basically accompanied with 500 footnotes. Norman Finkelstein, who is arguably one of the leading authorities in the world today on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, although some may argue I have my difference. I believe it's the competition between the most kind of prolific scholars on the subject would possibly be between Norman Finkelstein and Professor Rashid Khalidi. So it's those two individuals that are out there. But he commented that South Africa produced a prolific document, a utterly prolific document, which was essentially second to none. And in relation to that, what they basically laid down is the basis in terms of why they believed Israel, in fact, committed what they believe is a possible case in terms of why they believe that Israel is in breach and in violation of the 1948 Genocide Convention. They brought the case invoking the obligation on Israel to prevent genocide as a signatory to the United Nations Genocide Convention. And they basically went at length in terms of showing how Israel's actions are genocidal in character because they intended bringing about the destruction of a substantial part of a Palestinian national, racial, as well as ethnic group. And they requested the ICJ to issue a binding legal order or on an interim basis prior to hearing on the merits of the application, requiring Israel to immediately suspend its military operations against Gaza. And they also pointed out that the acts and the omissions by Israel are genocidal in character, as they are committed with a specific requisite intent to destroy Palestinians in Gaza, and that these genocidal actions included the mass killings of Palestinians in Gaza, the destructions of their homes, the expulsion and displacement, the fact that they destroyed the north of Gaza and then told Palestinians to move south. And then when they moved south, they destroyed the south of the middle of Gaza and the south of Gaza, that they claimed that they were very benevolent by issuing pamphlets and putting something on social media in terms of certain maps where Palestinians can go to. But the day before they submitted that, They cut off the internet streaming. No internet, no Wi-Fi, no fiber, no 5G, no 4G, no nothing. They cut off all electricity. There is a blockade of food. There's a blockade of water. They are taking babies from the incubators and letting them suffocate to death. We've had situations like the Shadia Abu Ghazala school, where Israeli Defense Force came in and they shot dead the entire community of refugees that were staying in that particular school as refugees. You had situations where they were bombing people in Rafah more recently. You had situations where they were killing women walking out of churches. You had a situation where, for example, in real time, they were shooting dead their own hostages who were half naked, coming to them and walking in a white flag. And surprisingly, this week out there, if those who are non-Muslim and Jewish or whatever the case is, on your TV station I followed, ITV, which is one of your stations, pointed an interview on ITV. I don't know if you've seen this, Brother Muhammad, this ITV viewing, where the ITV journalist, I forget his name, interviewed a Palestinian amongst a group of Palestinians, and about a minute later, he's shot dead. And that was raised by Stephen Fleming in the British Parliament, where he questioned the shameless excuse of a leader, Rishi Sunak, as to whether he considers that a war crime. And Rishi Sunak would not answer. I'm not so sure if you're familiar, you probably are familiar with that, Brother Muhammad, this incident about the shooting. We saw it sporadically. It wasn't on our major television networks, but those of us who do follow some of the overseas news, like the ITV and BBC for that matter, had access and sight of this particular information. So clearly, that's a whole base of South Africa, and they spent a laborious time detailing and dealing with the basis for genocidal intent, because that in itself is a very difficult task. And what South Africa did, remarkably so, and this is what we dealt with the last occasion, they cited all the leaders, all the military officials, all the representatives, asserting that those statements by Netanyahu when he invokes the Amalekite massacre, by Smotrich when he wants to nuke Gaza, by Yoav Gallant when he wants to say there's no food, no water, no shelter, we're dealing with human animals, by Naftali Bennett, by individuals that are basically dehumanizing the entire Palestinian population. We'll go through some of the judgments, some of the quotations given, that in fact constitutes a direct and public incitement to genocide, which has gone unchecked and unpunished. And on that basis, they submit that the Israeli soldiers on the ground were simply channeling that in relation to what the leaders were saying. So if you've got the Amalekite massacre being invoked, which is a mass murder of men, women, children, donkeys, babies, infants, and sucklings, and then you juxtapose that with the ground situation in Gaza, where men, women, children, babies, suckling, infant, oxen, donkeys, animals, cats, babies are all being slaughtered. There's a correlation between the two. And so, in a nutshell, to conclude on that point, South Africa made a devastating, in my opinion, presentation, and there was no refutation. There was absolutely no refutation. There is a lawyer that I hear on your one of the stations that's also interviewed on Sky News. The name I think is Natasha Washington. That's part of a group called Lawyers who belong to Friends of Israel or something along that line. And I think one of the points is that Israel wants to spin this particular judgment as a victory in their favor. But let's get this clear. And I want to address some of the points Brother Muhammad stated about the disappointment, because I was also disappointed and cynical initially. Israel stated before the hearing that this application will be totally dismissed. There's no basis, there's no merits, there's no substance. John Kirby and Anthony Blinken stated it was fruitless. This is a meritless application, ridiculous, it won't see the light of the day. We realized later that the court did not dismiss the application as they predicted, and the court said, no, there's no grounds for the application to be dismissed. The second point they made is that this court has no jurisdiction to hear this particular application. There's no jurisdiction meaning the ability and the standing of a court to hear a particular matter. The court stated in response, this court indeed has the jurisdiction to hear this matter. The third point they stated, Israel stated, well, there's no dispute between South Africa and Israel, so this application must be dismissed. The court stated, look, there is a dispute in relation to the interpretation of the Genocide Convention, which South Africa claims that Israel has breached. And the fourth point is that the State of Israel stated that there was nothing there that Israel was doing that could fall or be capable of falling within the provisions of the Genocide Convention. The court said, in response to what Israel claimed, that some of the acts and omissions alleged by South Africa to have been committed by Israel appear to be capable of falling within the provisions of the Genocide Convention. The court also expressed grave concern about the fate of hostages held in the Gaza Strip, and they further went on to recognize a catastrophic situation in Gaza at a serious risk of deteriorating further prior to a final verdict. Now, that's about, I don't know how many you counted, but that's about 5 or 6 points which Israel assumed would not go their way, but in fact did go South Africa's way. So this now comes to the question whether, what about the aspect of the ceasefire? Well, I must admit, when I first saw and read the judgment, I didn't read the judgment because I was in court myself, and I did a presentation, I think an interview prior to the judgment being delivered, and then I only got to read the actual judgment in its record over the weekend. What we had is a situation in terms which I believed and I viewed it as a Pyrrhic victory, meaning, as some have described it, as a victory without win, because of the fact that one of the primary requests that were made by South Africa is that the South African government specifically requested that Israel engage in a ceasefire. If you look at this document here, if I go to the exact document, number one, the State of Israel shall immediately suspend its military operations in and against Gaza. Number two, the State of Israel shall ensure that any military or irregular army units which may have supported, influence, as well as organizations and persons which may be subject to its control, take no steps in furtherance of the military operations referred to in point 1. So the idea of suspending its military operations in and against Gaza was what one of the provisional measures that Israel requested, that South Africa requested. And the court, unfortunately, for some reason, did not deal with that provisional measure. But I see that a number of individuals out there have essentially predicted that the court would not deal with the aspect of the ceasefire because there are two aspects. Number one, as some have stated, that a ceasefire can only exist when there are two parties that are engaged in conflict or in war. Then you can call for a ceasefire. If there's a crime of genocide, you can't call for a ceasefire because that would mean cessation of a conflict between two parties. In a crime for genocide, there are no two parties. There is a crime of genocide that is being committed against people, which involves killing members, causing serious bodily and mental harm, and deliberately inflicting on a group conditions of life calculated to bring about in physical destruction in part or whole, or imposing measures intended to prevent births within a particular group. Now, in a conventional war, that's not what basically takes place. So you ask for a ceasefire. You don't ask for a ceasefire where genocide takes place. You ask that the genocide not be committed. So some have argued that nevertheless, even though a ceasefire was not called for, this particular would also infer that you can't call for a ceasefire where a genocide is in place. The second point is that had a ceasefire been called, or had there been a cessation of military conflict, that would effectively mean that there's an order. How would the order be implemented? For the order to be implemented, it would have to go now to the UN Security Council, where a decision will be made in relation to the steps taken to either implement or reject this calling of the cessation of hostilities, or alternatively calling for the ceasefire in relation to an existing conflict taking place. And the likelihood is that since the United States and the United Kingdom exercised the veto, they would have vetoed any vote that would have been made. So that's a one point. So in relation to the fact that there is no ceasefire, and the fact that the situation on the ground has not changed very much for the Palestinians, that is lamentable, and that is tragic, and that is unfortunate. And I do not believe that if there was an order calling for a ceasefire, that Israel would have stopped its bombing campaign in any event. It would have continued. However, what you now have a situation is, for the first time, Israel will now have to present a report within a week. And for the first time, Israel is on trial for mass murder, for genocide. This is a trial. You see, what we need to understand, Brother Muhammad, is that a lot of the Israelis out there and the Israeli propagandists are spinning this as a victory. Oh, there's no ceasefire. They're spinning this as a victory. And they use this as a means for propaganda. But what we need to do is counter that propaganda, counter that by suggesting that in reality there is no victory for Israel. Israel now, the court has declared that it's going to go on trial. So if a suspect commits a murder and the court decides it's not going to strike off a possible charge that has been laid against it, but it's going to make sure and ensure that the suspect goes on trial for murder, that can't be seen as a victory. That's basically putting the individual in the fire and stating you now need to stand trial. So essentially what the court is saying, comprising of 17 judges, is that, and of course one dissenting judge, which was a Ugandan judge, is that for the first time Israel will be standing trial for mass murder. Israel has engaged in acts which possibly fulfill the definitions and fall within the provisions of the Genocide Convention. And this now needs to be tested. So it's on trial for genocide. And it is now given an order to desist from committing genocidal acts and committing genocide against the Palestinians and upholding international humanitarian law. Now, Israel may make the claim that, look, it is doing that, but in reality, there is now regardless of how you look at it, there is a noose around the neck. The first prize that Israel wanted was that this application is frivolous, it is baseless. Your propagandist by the name of Alon Levi, he was on Channel 4 with Krishnan, and you know what I think it was Channel 4 or on Krishnan or one of the other stations or LBC. He stated, I cannot when he's questioned what would you do if the ICJ grants provisional measures. So his response was, I cannot contemplate of an absurd hypothetical. That's his word. I cannot contemplate of an absurd hypothetical in a world where the ICJ will even consider that and not dismiss this frivolous application. Well, let the entire world know that a nation like South Africa, which has no doubt high levels of inequality, we have our own problems, we are viewed and categorized as third world, that nation has taken Israel and is grabbing Israel by the throat at this juncture. And the ICJ is now telling Israel and all these scumbags and these criminals out there in the Knesset that now you are going to be standing trial for genocide. So let the people out there know certainly we wanted a ceasefire. If the ceasefire was granted, I doubt Israel would have stopped in an event. What people out there need to know, that this application, the provisional order, if there's one thing that you need to realize, if there's one talking point that people need to realize and spread to the world out there, if they're ever in speaker's corner or confronting these Zionists, tell them that this court, the International Court of Justice, has now stated that Israel has to stand trial for genocide, for mass murder. And genocide is viewed as the crime of crimes. This is a crime of crimes. The greatest crime you can consider is genocide, and Israel and genocide are now next to each other. Just like Nazi Germany, which was a forerunner to the state of Israel, because you look at what happened in Nazi Germany, you look at the creation of Israel in 1948, Nazi Germany and genocide are together. These two names, you think of Nazi Germany, you think of genocide, and the Genocide Convention was as a result of Nazi Germany, a product of that. Now we have in 2021, in the 20th century, it was Nazi Germany and genocide. In the 21st century, it is Israel and genocide. Israel and genocide as a major power. We know we've had other genocides taking place and other Holocausts, but I'm saying in terms of a major Western government, even though it claims to be Middle Eastern, it's a Western government. It's a settler colony of imperial power, which has no place whatsoever in the Middle East. That's what it really is. So for the first time, it'll be facing this trial and standing on trial for genocide. So that's a kind of a nutshell that we were pertaining to this. And Brother Muhammad, if you want to maybe open the decision by the judge, and maybe we could go through a few provisions in relation to that.
Yeah, before I do that, Brother Yusuf, is that a couple of people mentioned regarding the Uganda decision, the female Julia Sebutine, I think her name is.
That's
in 2000,
yeah.
In 2022, when the Russia and Ukraine war took place, she voted in favor in all three aspects against Russia, to say Russia is committing crimes, which are leading to genocide, and just going a lot more further than she has on this particular ruling. But I do think some of these governments are paid. I think they're bribed and stuff. And that's apparent to see. So that's very interesting. You asked me to share the screen, but
I just want to make a point on that, Judge. I see Norman Finkelstein and Craig Mukhiber made the point, which is quite a radical point to make, is that they stated that they doubt the judge wrote the dissenting judgment herself. They doubt she wrote it herself. And, I don't know if I mentioned it last week. I did mention that Uganda would possibly vote in favor of Israel and against the South African case. But I also added the United States, Russia and China may abstain, France, Germany, Israel, and I think one other country, Germany, United Kingdom, I think. And it appears that on all the points, I was wrong. All those countries voted against Israel. And the Ugandan judge, if you look at the decision at the end, is the only judge that voted against the provisional measures. The only judge that voted against the provisional measures. We'll go through it. Even in certain instances, the Israeli judge, Aharon Barak, that's his name. He's, I think, in his 80s, Aharon Barak. He voted against Israel. For example, in the case where there was an order, we'll come to it, that Israel should punish any incitement or genocidal statements or statements conveying genocidal intent. He voted in favor of it. He stated, yes, it should be punished. She voted against it. Can you believe it? She voted against that. So I don't know what was going on there. I really don't know what was going on there. But I do have an article that I saw, which was just published a couple of hours back by a teacher in South Africa, an open letter in one of our daily papers to Judge Julia Sebutinde, where this particular individual, he's an academic, he's a teacher, he states and starts off whether he doesn't know whether to call the response to the outrageous and controversial dissension that she gave to South Africa as just simply something embellished with legal jargon, or something which is just so totally insane. He made the point, this is a quotation he gives, he says, "I am no legal expert, but had to respond to your obvious violation of not only the international law, but also the violation of the rights of other human beings to life, which by you refuse to recognize. I shall deal with each matter you raise, but first I want to deal with the cognitive human being in you and not the legal academic you are, because clearly that part of you has left heavy scars on your womanhood, your humanity, and your thinking capabilities. This on its own is in relation to the judgment, is an embarrassment that says a lot about the so-called independence of the judiciary. Not only that, the reaction of the Ugandan authorities is an indication of shame, because Uganda has actually shamed her. They've disassociated from her. And this is what he says: most of all, your conduct has given the world a window through which to see the kind of a judicial system you come from, which is a rather shocking indictment on where she stands. And I think this may, in fact, destroy a legal career. This will destroy a legal career. This will basically destroy everything. Because if you look at a dissenting judgment, and I read it for the first time this afternoon in preparation for this. I didn't have access to it earlier, but I read the dissenting judgment, and it is clear that she's making facts and statements. And having heard what Finkelstein and Craig Mokaiba stated, that somebody else wrote about this, she goes into some of the cliched discussions of Israel, going into things like the Oslo Accords and the failed Oslo Accords, and how the Palestinian side had basically, in a sense, were contributed to the failure of the agreement between the parties. She goes into the kind of cliched propagandist talking points, which you'd find someone like Mark Regev and Elon Levi and some of these pundits on mainstream media will mention, which goes to show that she doesn't know anything about the situation on the ground. It's doubtful she knows about the history of the state of Israel. It's doubtful she knows anything about Hamas or anything along that line. She goes with the same, you read her judgment, you read a dissenting judgment, she goes with the situation. If I can post it, I can post it in due course, but she goes with the situation of the beheaded babies and the mutilation that was committed on October 7th and the rape that happened, all of which has been debunked now, months later, has been debunked as total rubbish by many major news outlets. But she goes with the same kind of cliche, which raises questions as to whether she was indeed the individual that wrote the particular judgment. And then she spoke about, at the same time, Hamas's intent of annihilation and genocide. Hamas was not on trial. I know Israel can make that claim, and they can come to the ICJ and say all of that, and the whole of the Israeli propagandist team can make that. But she's a judge. As a judge, she clearly knows that Hamas is not a party to the Genocide Convention, and any discussion on Hamas is totally irrelevant from a legal point of view. From a legal point of view, it's totally inconsequential. But beyond that, she basically doesn't know the common law principle of the Audi Altrum Partem rule, which is that an experienced judge should know that the other side has a right to be heard before conclusions could be reached and can be made. And so Hamas hasn't had a stake in this. They haven't made any representations at all, even though the allegations are that South Africa is a legal arm for Hamas, which is absolute rubbish. But on all these points, I may just add one thing. Let me just read this before I can get. There's something which particularly shocked me. Let me just try. This was the dissenting. Yeah, this was the dissenting judgment of Sebutinde. It's here. I think you can, if you go to the UN website, the International Court of Justice, you can download it. But she made a point here, which I want to possibly read before we go into the main judgment. Where are we? Yeah. This is the point which is amazing. You remember 2 weeks ago, we went through in detail all those statements conveying genocidal intent, quoted by various leaders, by Netanyahu, by Smotrich, by Yoav Gallant, and all of that. And I mean, we went through them in detail. We went through them in comprehensive detail, and they were quoted in comprehensive detail by the South Africans when they brought this 84-page application. In her dissenting judgment, this is what she says in response to that. Regarding the statements of Israeli top officials and politicians that South Africa cited as containing genocidal rhetoric, this is her response. A careful examination of those statements, read in their proper and full context, shows that South Africa has either placed the quotations out of context or simply misunderstood the statements of those officials. Can you believe that? So, when Smotrich says we are to nuke Gaza, what is a misunderstanding? When Netanyahu says, remember what Amalek is doing, what Amalek did to you, what are you to now do? What is the misunderstanding? When Herzog, for example, states that there's no difference between civilians and Hamas, they're all the same. They're all the same. In fact, I may add, in the actual judgment itself, the actual 29-page application that was eventually before the court, Judge Donahue, she in fact goes on, and this was before the. I'm just trying to open the page and see where I came across this, but Judge Donahue went at length, and this is what she said. She, for example, quoted Israel Katz, the Minister of Energy and Infrastructure, and this is the quotation by Judge Donahue, the chair of the ICJ. She says, and she quotes him in full, "We will fight the terrorist organization Hamas and destroy it. All the civilian population in Gaza is ordered to leave immediately. We will win. They will not receive a drop of water or a single battery until they leave the world." How the hell do you leave the world? And then Isaac Herzog states, it is not true this is rhetoric about civilians not aware, not involved. It's absolutely not true. They could have risen up. They could have fought against the evil regime which took over Gaza in a coup d'etat. And by the way, it was not a coup d'etat. They were elected. What coup d'etat is he talking about? But we are at war. We are at war. We are at war. We are at war. This is in the quotation. He repeats it 4 times. We are defending our homes. We are protecting our homes. And when a nation protects its homes, it fights, and will fight until we break their backbone. I don't care. I have released all restraints. This is what we are fighting for. Gaza won't return to what it was before. If it doesn't take 1 day, it'll take a week, it'll take weeks, it'll take 11 months. We will reach all places. Now, help me, Brother Muhammad. Is there anything in that, and this is in the main judgment, which was quoted by Judge Donahue and backed by at least 15 of those 17 judges, and in some cases 16 of the 17 judges. Yet this lady states, and I don't know whether she was smoking when she made this judgment or whether it's written by someone else, the vast majority of the statements refer to the destruction of Hamas and not the Palestinian people. Then she says following, certain renegade statements by officials who are not charged with prosecuting Israel's military operations were subsequently highly criticized by the Israeli government itself. More importantly, the official war policy of the Israeli government contains no indicators of a genocidal intent. In my assessment, there are also no indicators of incitement to commit genocide. So this goes to show you the hogwash that constitutes this particular judgment. And I hope the world sees her for the shameless judge that she is. And I can tell you that her career is destroyed after this, totally destroyed, completely destroyed.
Yeah, but Yusuf, I just want to add, Yusuf, sorry, I just want to add that, these individuals, they don't do it for careers, they do it for financial gains. And they don't think that they have to stand in front of their Lord and have to be judged. Their paradise is on this earth, And what you mentioned is very important here in the UK. The majority of the media outlets refused to show the first part of the hearing when South Africa had to make their case. No one, the BBC, nobody showed it. But the next day when Israel responded, that was on TV. To be honest, brothers and sisters, it feels for me that we're living at a time where the people who are good are being nullified and made to appear that they are evil and they are in the wrong. The ones who are calling for peace and peace and what you call it again, the ceasefire, ceasefire and humanitarian aid for the people in Gaza, they are really looked down upon by the hierarchy. And we see thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people protesting, marching in the streets, but the media they just don't show that. If there's a push or a fight or somebody shouting something which is, according to them, negative, they put that on the news. But as for anything else, for the UK and the Western countries, I do feel now it's like I'm not going to say it in a particular way because I've got to be careful. It's like Nazism. It really is, because when it came to Ukraine and Russia, the fact that they had blue eyes, blonde hair, we were told in the UK to bring them into your homes, adopt a Ukrainian. We were told to, it was ridiculous, Brother Yusuf. I don't know if you heard about that.
I heard of that. I heard one of the individuals. It was either a journalist or a politician of some sort, and he made the comment that these people. He was saying it with tears in his eyes. No, it's crocodile tears. That these people are like us. There was a comment he made exactly. They've got blonde hair and blue eyes. And so they try to create. I mean, I may add one point that your government support Ukraine, but people don't know one of the groups in Ukraine that was fighting against Russia, the Azov Battalion, you probably heard of them, are a neo-Nazi fascist organization. And in fact, they embrace fascism. So there you've got a situation where it's a kind of an inversion in reality. And I don't support Russia, so I'm not backing Russia in any way. But you did have in the Ukrainian context, and from Russia's perspective, they stated that NATO were on their borders. And so Ukraine, which was part of the Soviet Union, once part of them, they wanted to annex Ukraine. And they claimed that they wanted to fight the Azov Battalion and fascist elements within the Ukraine military, which can be confirmed because the Azov Battalion and some of these militia outfits in Ukraine are neo-Nazi. I mean, if you look at a large part of Eastern Europe, neo-Nazism is there. It is there. And yet the European press and the British press not once ever criticized the Ukrainian military as well as these Ukrainian militia outfits like the Azov Battalion as being neo-Nazi, even though they've openly proclaimed it. And in many instances, you can see where they are standing with the swastika in real time. And yet Hamas, on the other hand, which has got absolutely no link, no nexus, no correlation, I mean, no ideological connection with Nazism or fascism or neo-Nazism, that now is being associated with the Nazis. When in reality, the people in the Israeli Knesset, like Smotrich, like some of these other extremist leaders who openly proclaim that they are fascists, nothing is mentioned about them. So this is an inversion of reality. And I'm not surprised that the United Kingdom blocked out the South African application and the presentation, because our case was so inherently devastating that everything that was presented could not be refuted, was not refuted in the end by Israel. And all of that goes directly against the talking points in the mainstream media. I mean, if the media shows that, what would it do? If your media were to show that, it would totally destroy the credibility. I mean, like I believe, and I'm told, a lot of you last year or the year before last never got to see the opening ceremony of the World Cup, right? In
correct,
Qatar.
Yeah.
We saw it, and there's a lot that I can say about Middle Eastern countries, but there were lots of aspects of that ceremony, where you had, for example, Denzel Washington and a little boy reciting Surah Hujurat, which is Ya Ayyuhan Nas Inna Khalaqna. He recited that basically at the stadium whilst communicating with, I think, Morgan Freeman. And then the translation, all that goes against the general cliched stereotypes that they wish to impose on Muslims in general. Forget Muslim governments, we know that they are corrupt, but on Muslims in general. So whenever there's something that is positive, whenever there's something that essentially will pull the rug under their feet, they will go out of bounds to block that out. And so I'm not surprised that they blocked that. And I think it's just a few stations. I believe Al Jazeera showed it, RT showed it, and Press TV. None of the other major channels showed it.
I've got another question for you, Yusuf, slightly going away from that. What about this United Nations funding that the Western countries refuse to fund some of the humanitarian aid for Gaza? Do you think that's like a bit of a payback, or the damage they're trying to they've realized that we supported Israel and we said all these things to back Israel? UNRWA.
UNRWA. That's the. You know what? Let me just explain what the situation, and maybe I'll read that in relation to the document itself. One of the document in the judgment itself. Maybe we can. You want to open the judgment because it's in relation to that aspect of UNRWA. If we can open the judgment itself, open the judgment. Do you have the judgment before you, brother?
What pages?
Yeah, go to page 25. If you go to page 25. Go to page 25 of the judgment. If you can open the judgment and go to page 25. And that's why that deals directly with the aspect of UNRWA. Page 25.
I'm just...
Okay. If you can open that, and I'll show you something in terms of...
It's the one that you sent me on WhatsApp, isn't it? I'm just trying to...
Yeah, it's basically, you had it on your screen. That's the one I showed you. That's the genocide application. UNRWA is a United Nations relief and works agency for Palestinian refugees in the Near East.
I don't know if I've got the right one.
I'll tell you now if you've got it. That's it. Now go to page 25. Right to page 25. Now go to page 25. Now that's the. Can you see? Let's start there. Let's go there. 15. I want you to go to paragraph 4. Paragraph 4. Paragraph 4. Go down. So you just go down. Paragraph 4. What does it say in paragraph 4? By 16 votes to 1. So you can see, I'm looking at the screen with us there. So by 16 votes to 1, the state of Israel shall take that to measure to punish the direct and public incitement of genocide. Then go to paragraph 4 after that. Paragraph 4, very important. 16 votes to 1. Look what it says. 16 votes to 1, meaning Judge Seputinde was against this, the Ugandan judge. The state of Israel shall take immediate and effective measures to enable the provision of urgently needed basic services and humanitarian assistance to address the adverse conditions of life faced by Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. Now, who provides that? Who actually provides that? It's provided by UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees in the Near East, is critical in that particular provision. And so it was established as a subsidiary organ by the General Assembly immediately in 1949 and became operational in 1950. It's one of the largest United Nations programs in the world itself. I mean, it's basically dealing with relief agency in different parts of the world. So what it does in relation to the development of Palestinian refugees, it was specifically encompassing in dealing with the displaced Palestinian refugees after the 1948 war. It was established to provide relief to all refugees resulting from the 1948 conflict. It employs about 30,000 people. And that provision in that judgment you just read there, that particular provision in that ruling, paragraph 4, deals directly with UNRWA. UNRWA is the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East. So that order was made on when? Friday Friday afternoon. Then on Sunday morning, for the first time, I saw an interview on ITV. Mark Regev comes and he says, we've had discussions, we've discovered, it's been discovered shockingly, that UNRWA was somehow or the other involved and dealing with terrorist activities and was involved in the massacre of October 7th. So can you see what's happening here?
It's actually an allegation.
Exactly what's happening.
It's an allegation. It wasn't actually stated on facts, but it's an allegation.
Absolutely. The point I'm saying, Brother Muhammad, is that you've got a judgment which has made an order that they have to now get involved in the Gaza Strip, and Israel has to allow them to enter the Gaza Strip and continue doing what they are doing without any form of interference, without any form of without putting them in any form of harm's way, without attacking them, allowing them to feed the Palestinians, to assist the refugees in this trying conflict. And then this weekend, for the first time, after this judgment was passed, conveniently, Israel now makes the claim that UNRWA was involved in the massacre of October 7th. I mean, you couldn't make this up. This is what we call the Israeli hasbara, the Israeli lies, the Israeli propaganda in real time. So this kind of people need to know that particular, so that would mean that effectively Israel is saying that particular ruling, which has just been passed by the ICJ, they can't fulfill that. Oh, they won't fulfill that. They won't give aid to the Palestinians. But there's a judgment here which says you need to give aid to the Palestinians. No, we don't. No, we can't, because we've now discovered that they were involved in the massacre on October 7th, and they were working with Hamas. Can you believe this? They were working with Hamas. I mean, it's not even an allegation. An allegation means something that needs to be tested and proven. This is an outright lie. This is a fabrication. This is a fiction that is being made up in real time. It's not an allegation. An allegation gives this some degree of respectability, that, look, there may be some sort of truth to this particular averment. But this is an outright, I have no hesitation in labeling this an outright lie. A lie by Israel, and a deliberate attempt on them to ensure that the Palestinians have absolutely no access to food, no access to water, and they are in the worst possible position that they're ever basically put. I mean, the entire history of UNRWA was in relation to the Palestinians. It was there pertaining to the Palestinian refugees, the whole notion of developing of who a refugee is and who it's allowed to provide humanitarian assistance. That was developed by UNRWA. It's a subsidiary of the United Nations General Assembly. It's a subsidiary to the, pursuant to Article 7 of the UN Charter. It's very much it's actually one of two UN agencies that in the world today that reports directly to the UN General Assembly. I mean, the other UN agencies out there that don't report to the UN General Assembly. And so the mandate is also shaped by requests from other UN organs, from the Secretary General, and the General Assembly then passes a series of resolutions that annually address UNRWA's responsibilities, its functions, its budget, all of that, the agency's mandate. And now Israel is saying, well, look, we can't fulfill this request made by you because of the fact that we've now discovered that they were involved in October 7th. So how come that information only came out now? We're now on the 29th of January. You're telling me October, November, December, January. When was the first time you heard about this? I heard about this on Sunday. When did you hear about this, Brother Mohammed?
It was early morning.
Yeah, early. I heard this on the weekend for the first time. I was not, I was not shocked at what I heard, but I was shocked at the audacity and the low pits, or the low levels, or the abyss that Israel would actually succumb to in ensuring that UNRWA does not fulfill its mandate, and that particular provision, this provision here, in terms of item 4, basically is not fulfilled. So you couldn't make this up. So maybe we can go back to the judgment itself, because there's we could go to page 24 to see what the actual court stated. So if we can go to page 24 of that same judgment, if you can just go put it up, and then I can show you a few items here and there that we could probably get through. Yeah, so page 24. Yeah, page 24, and then you go to the bottom of page 24. So, yeah, page 24, bottom. Yeah, for these reasons, it starts from there. So by 15 votes to 2, the state of Israel shall, in accordance, that's 15 votes to 2, the two judges again, Judge Sabutinde and Judge Aaron Barak, that voted against this particular order, shall, in accordance with its obligations under the Convention on the Prevention of Genocide, take all measures within its power to prevent the commission of all acts within the scope of Article 2 of this convention. In particular, so this is an order, means it's now, I mean, although it was binding, but now it's spelled out in relation to this. If you go to the next page, page 25, the very next page, if you go further down, brother.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it needs to do all those killing members of the group, causing serious bodily, mental harm, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical, and of course, imposing measures to prevent births within the group. So coming back to your original point, it didn't make an order for a ceasefire, but I don't think we should see this as I'll tell you one thing. I have a brother, a good brother. His name, you may be listening to this. He's an elder. He's a mentor. He's been a mentor of mine. I call him Uncle Solly, Suleiman Vahed. And he was discussing this matter with me, and he was very disheartened and shocked by the outcome insofar as Israel never, the ICJ never basically implemented what they call the ceasefire or the desisting of conflict. And so what's the point of this whole process? So I told him that, look, let's not see this as a negative outcome. I was also cynical initially on Friday, and I say this, let's not, I said, what is this? This is, I mean, there's nothing on ceasefire here. But I looked at it, and then I looked at some of the points in Islamic history, and it just struck me, and I don't know if some of the brothers, maybe it's a bad analogy, maybe it's a good analogy, I don't know. But I told him, it's just something that struck me, is that why don't we see this as al-Hudaybiyah? Why don't we see this as al-Hudaybiyah? The Treaty of Hudaybiyah, is described in the Quran. Firstly, the Treaty of Hudaybiyah was a major compromise insofar as, the Muslims could not basically go on and perform the pilgrimage. If someone from the Meccans, the pagan Quraysh, were to defect and go to the Muslim camp, they would have to be returned, but not vice versa. So it placed the community of the early Muslim community, the believers, in a massive back foot. And the vast majority of the Muslims were dissatisfied. And the Prophet ﷺ, through his divine wisdom and foresight that Allah had given him, knew the eventual outcome and accepted the compromise. And even though it was a major compromise and placed Muslims on a back foot in relation to them dealing with this belligerent, tyrannical Qurayshi regime in the 6th century, the Quran states, "Inna fatahna laka fatham mubina." Verily, we have granted you a manifest victory. And many people assume that this manifest victory, you ask them, even you ask some alims locally in South Africa, you ask them, what is this manifest victory? They'll say it's the conquest of Mecca. But look at some of the classical mufassirin, and they will all tell you, without any doubt, that this in fact refers to the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. So I'm saying to the brothers out there, don't let Israel get away by spinning this particular document as a win. It's not a win for Israel. If Israel tells you they've won, they're lying to you by virtue of the fact that they claim there's no ceasefire. They are on trial. See this as al-Hudaybiyah. Yes, we don't have a ceasefire. And yes, the resistance by Hamas has to continue. And the resistance by other Palestinian factions has to, in fact, continue. And we need to create this global awareness. And we need to help and support the Palestinians at whatever level we can do and continue with the particular struggle. But see this judgment as our Hudaybiyah, our victory, insofar as for the first time in human history, Israel is now standing on trial for mass murder. Israel is now standing on trial for genocide. So go back to and I'm going to end this, the last, these judgments. Go to page 25, brother, again, and we'll just wrap up this particular report, and we can go into other discussion. We can just put that back on the screen.
Yeah, bear with me. I'm just going to get it.
That's fine. Not a problem.
I closed it, but let me just get it back. Because when I use my laptop, I don't have best. But I've got it now, and I'm gonna see if I can.
That's fine. It's not a problem. It's not a problem.
No, it's not. Ya Allah. Yeah, so I do apologize.
That's fine. It's not fine.
For some reason I can't get it back up now. But there's quite a few questions.
If you can't get it back up, it's fine. I can just go through some of the material that I have before me. Yeah, if we can't get it up, that's fine. Unless I share my screen. Do you want me to share my screen?
Yeah, maybe it'll work.
I go to settings. Where are we? Stop cam present, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll just try and open my where are we? The ICJ ruling. Okay, so I'm gonna go to just go there, share screen. Where are we? Do you have it there now?
Yeah, I got it. Alhamdulillah.
Is it on? Right. So if we go to, for example, it was page 25. So that's page 24. We saw page 25. Yeah. So that's it. They're killing. So then of course you go to paragraph 2 again. 15 votes to 2. The state of Israel shall ensure its in effect that its military does not commit any acts as described in point 1. So essentially, one could argue it's not a ceasefire per se, but it's telling you are to stop killing civilians. You are to stop killing civilians. 16 votes to 1. State of Israel shall take all measures to prevent and punish the public incitement to commit genocide. Now here, which is standard, every single judge, including the Israeli judge, can you see a judge, Aharon Barak? He even basically, he stated that he agrees with that he basically agrees with this whole notion that Israel needs to stop basically committing any form of incitement to genocide. This is what he says. And as you can clearly see, who's the dissenting judge there? The dissenting judge is, what's her name? The Judge Sabutinde. So Judge Sabutinde is the dissenting judge. Again, here it doesn't make sense. The next thing, 16 votes to 1. The state of Israel shall take immediate and effective measures to enable the provisions of urgently needed humanitarian aids. Even the Israeli judge here agrees with that. Who's the dissenting judge? Sebutinde. Can you see the problem we've got there? And then, again, like I said, this deals directly with UNRWA. This is a reason why I believe, because of the fact that now it means that aid, once you get humanitarian assistance in, once you get aid workers in, more and more people will be coming and will be seeing the actual position on the ground. Because right now there's no, you can get reporters, independent reporters going in with UNRWA. And that's not what Israel wants. So this is their fear. So therefore they are now tarnishing the United Nations Relief Workers Agency and saying that they were involved. I mean, how on earth were they involved? And how did they get to know? I mean, because Israel stated that they burned 200 Hamas fighters. How did they discover amongst the burned bodies that, look, these burned bodies were Hamas, these burned bodies were belonging to UNRWA? How the hell did they know? They never kidnapped anyone. They never caught anyone to say, look, you are now part working for the United Nations Relief Fund. They caught up with the Hamas individuals, 1 or 2 Hamas fighters they had. How on earth did they find this out conveniently? And then, of course, you go on, 15 votes to 2. The State of Israel shall prevent the destruction, preservation of evidence. This is quite important, meaning anything, and how to implement it again. If they don't, they will have to basically bear the burden in the ICJ. Again, 15 votes to 2. Number 6, 15 votes to 2. State of Israel shall support a report on all measures taken to give effect to it within 1 month. I think South Africa stated 1 week. The ICJ stated 1 month, which is, again, a compromise, not what we wanted, but still they have to submit a report. Again, the judges that are against this are Sebutinde and Aaron Barak. Now, you can see in all this, we've got a majority. All this is a majority. So how we should not allow, my view is that there's 2 wars we are fighting with. One is a war on the ground, and the other is the ideological war. My advice to some of the brothers, and even some of them here that expressed disappointment, is that let's not allow Israel to spin this as a propaganda war. Let's not allow Israel to spin this as a victory for itself. And I mean, be that as it may, whilst the provisional orders were not granted to the fullest, in this judgment itself, if you read this 29-page judgment, every single thing, every single point that South Africa has made in its application, not a single argument, and hear this out, this is how significant it is, not a single argument of Israel found itself or way into this judgment. Not one. Not one. The jurisdiction, the prima facie jurisdiction, the locus standi of South Africa, the rights whose protection is sought and the link between such rights and the measures requested, all of that, it was like a slam dunk. What we would say, it's like in a penalty shootout. And well, a penalty shootout's a bad example. Probably a tennis game where it was a 40-love tennis game completely. It was a total knockout. So like I said earlier on, some have seen this as a victory without a win, but this particular judgment is devastating and should be used ideologically as a stick to beat Israel with. I mean, they've mentioned this. This is a judge's comments. This is a judge's stuff. It's not a rehashing South Africa's argument, but she takes note. The court takes note. Gaza has become a place of death and despair. Families are sleeping in the open as temperatures plummet. Areas where civilians were told to relocate for their safety have come under bombardment. So this whole rubbish about human shields and safe passage, all rubbished. Medical facilities under relentless attack. Public health disasters unfolding. 180 Palestinian women are giving birth daily amidst this chaos. People are facing the highest levels of food insecurity ever recorded. No children in particular in the trial, for children in the particular 12 weeks have been traumatic. No food, no water, no school, nothing but the terrifying sounds of war day in and day out. Gaza has become uninhabitable. Its people are witnessing daily threats to their very existence whilst the world watches on. This is all part of the judgment. I mean, this is all part of the ICJ judgment, the World Court judgment. Court notes the Commissioner General for the United Nations Relief and Works Agency. This is a quotation that the court is quoting from UNRWA, Philip Lazzarini, on the 13th of January, that it's been 100 days since the devastating war killing. So the court's viewing this as an authority. The court is viewing this as an authority. By UNRWA, they stated in the past 100 days, sustained bombardments across the Gaza Strip caused mass displacement. This has been the largest displacement of Palestinian people since 1948. Can we imagine that? I mean, we never lived through. I mean, I was a child in the Lebanon War of 82, the Sabra and Shatila, the famous 1967 wars, and the 1973 Ramadan War and the Oslo Accords of the 79 and Anwar Sadat. This is the largest displacement of Palestinian people since 1948. This is what the court recognizes. Largest ever. This is history. Overcrowded and unsanitary UNRWA shelters have now become home to more than 1.4 million people. They lack everything from food, hygiene to privacy. People living in inhumane conditions where diseases are spreading, including amongst children. They live through unlivable, with the clock ticking fast towards famine. Again, quoting UNRWA. Thousands have been killed, hundreds and thousands deprived of education. Their future is in jeopardy with far-reaching consequences. UNRWA, the Gaza Strip, Philip Lazzarini. The UNRWA Commissioner General also stated that the crisis in Gaza is compounded by dehumanizing language. What's he saying here? He's saying that this dehumanizing language by these thugs, by these criminal gangsters in Knesset, are enabling the insanity that you see on the ground. So can you see how many times, Brother Muhammad, UNRWA, this relief agency, is quoted? How many times in this judgment? Can you see that?
Yeah.
And this is a source. This is a source for the judge. I mean, this is a source for 16 judges, at least 16, including the Israeli judge. A large portion of this judgment is information directly from this relief agency. And 2 days later, these swines have the bloody audacity, forgive my language, to say, look, UNRWA now is involved in the massacre of October 7th. I mean, you couldn't make this up. This is George Orwell's 1984 in real time. Real time. The court also was emboldened enough to say, and this was, they looked at the South African judgment, and even though Sebutinde stated it's out of context, they quoted the judgment in full. In this regard, the court has taken note of a number of disturbing statements. These are statements made by senior Israeli officials. It calls attention in particular to the following examples, meaning genocidal intent. The one by Yoav Galan, this is a defense minister of Israel. You remember what Jebutinde, the lady who says, no, these are all low-level people. This is what Galan states. I released all restraints. She quotes Herzog, president of Israel. We're at war, no distinction. She quotes Israel Katz, Minister of Energy. They will not, here's a quote, they will not receive a drop of water or single battery until they leave the world. She didn't even quote Netanyahu. She didn't even have to quote Netanyahu Amalek. She didn't even have to quote the Amalekite massacre. This in itself is insane, as you basically. So I give the court credit. I understand the point of the brothers that expressed disappointment, but in the body of the judgment itself, I was disappointed when I first heard it. Before I read it, I was really disheartened, and I was driving home and listening to the information on radio, and I was disheartened about the fact that, look, as some commentators were saying, it's a Pyrrhic victory, it's a win, it's a victory without a win. But in reality, we need to see this for what it is. Israel is damned in this document. Yes, Palestinians are still suffering. And even if the ICJ passed a provisional measure for ceasefire, they wouldn't have listened. Highly unlikely they would have listened. What will now happen with this judgment is that on Wednesday, that's today's Monday, Wednesday, before the Security Council, there will be a special convening and there will be a motion passed. And it's my prediction that South Africa will ask for a motion calling for a ceasefire and a cessation of hostilities, and that Israeli military terrorist, we can call it terrorist action, they're going to call it military operations, have to come to a halt. And we'll see then whether the United Kingdom and the United States, in fact, have the guts to go against the substance of this particular judgment and state no. Basically, the military operations and the bombings have to, in fact, continue. But this Wednesday is the day where there will be a convention, there will be a special hearing, and I believe that South Africa will basically put this to the Security Council. The court has basically even identified and accepted the risk of irreparable prejudice and urgency. In the sense, the condition of urgency is met when the acts of susceptible causing ill can occur at any moment before the court makes a final decision. The court is not called upon for the purpose of its decision on the request for the indication to establish the existence of the breaches of the obligation, but to determine whether the circumstances require the indication of provisional measures for the protection of the right of that instrument. As already noted, the court cannot make at this stage definitive findings of fact, meaning findings of genocide right now, but they believe that there is an argument to be made in relation to that. Israel denies existence of a real and imminent and irreparable prejudice. The court rubbished that particular argument. The court stated that genocide is a denial of the right and existence of human beings. And in view of the fundamental values sought by the genocide protection, the court considers that the plausible rights in questions in its proceedings, namely the right of Palestinians to be protected from acts of genocide article and the right of Israel to seek Israel's compliance under the convention, are of such a nature that prejudice to them is capable of causing irreparable harm. Irreparable harm. The healthcare is collapsing, no way safe in Gaza, amid constant bombardment by the IDF and without a shelter. I expect public order to completely break down soon due to the desperate conditions, rendering even limited humanitarian assistance impossible. That's a quotation where the judge quotes the Secretary General of the United Nations. And the court considers that the civilian population remain extremely vulnerable, tens of thousands of deaths. The court notes that the operation is ongoing, and the Prime Minister of Israel stated that war will take many more months. At present, many people in Gaza have no access to basic food. So, and then the court also accepts the figures of 27,500. It accepts that figures. So this idea that's now going to be spun out there, as many people still do, these are Hamas figures. No, it's by the Gaza Ministry of Health, which of course was a body on its own, backed by Medicine Sans Frontières, backed by UN agencies, and the court has accepted the actual figure, well, at least at that stage, when the judgment was passed, as actually amounting to 27,000 or 25,700. So this is a situation in a nutshell in relation to all the facts that that the court has imposed upon Israel. So it's not conclusive in terms of saying, look, spelling out Israel, stop your military operation. And I think one other argument is that Israel would make the claim that if that happens, then there's no actual order against Hamas. Let's assume Hamas hypothetically continues its strikes or military operations. So Israel's going to say, well, you've stated something against Israel. What have you said against Hamas? But Hamas is not a party to the convention. So I don't want to give the court the benefit of the doubt, and I'm disappointed that the court never made a provision of a ceasefire, and I believe that there were grounds that there could have been a provision leading to that. Nonetheless, Ali Abu Nima and others like from the Electronic Intifada have argued that in a case of genocide, you don't need a ceasefire. You need to stop the genocide, because ceasefire only makes sense in a war. And the reality of the situation, you've got a genocide, and the court is telling Israel, stop committing genocide. Take measures within your power to prevent the commission of all these acts. So whilst these were provisions that were existent in the Genocide Convention, and in the past, all parties are signatory to the Genocide Convention and are requested to uphold these particular laws and uphold international humanitarian law, now we've got an order by a court to say Israel specifically, not South Africa, not Thailand, not Saudi Arabia, not Morocco, not the UK, Israel, you are now to stop killing members of groups. You are now to stop engaging in what could possibly constitute genocide. You are to stop doing this. So we should not let the Israeli sides, as I stated, spin this as a win. And I think we should use this particular judgment at least from an ideological point of view, as a stick to beat Israel with and tell them, look, shame on you that after 1948, after all these years of existence in the 21st century, you are the major power in the world that will for the first time be facing the crime of genocide. You are now on trial for genocide. That's what this order basically says in a nutshell. Yes, Palestinians are suffering, and yes, we need to do something about it. And no, this court never made an order of ceasefire, but the court did state trial is now going to begin. And this order, this application is no longer dismissed as you believed it was going to be dismissed. You are going to face trial. You can't run away with it. And you are basically going to stand trial for a number of years, and your reputation will be tainted forever.
It is quite damning. If the way you explained it, you went into detail. I really appreciate that. I think to the audience and to myself, I don't think this information has been, especially in the media, is not being brought up and hasn't been explained. I have seen where both here in the UK, where they say, look, this is more favorable to Israel, and but now after going through it and the way you broke it down, it's clearly black and white that Israel are going to be damned at the end of the day.
And you can see also, Brother Muhammad, sorry to interrupt you, but you can see also why UNRWA came under so much of attack suddenly this weekend. How they are masters at spin and how they put out their propaganda, and the mainstream media just runs with it. But you can see now the reason why they are viewed as, they're essentially calling them. This judge utilized the information, a lot of the information coming from UNRWA. And Israel is now saying UNRWA, which is ordered by this court to effectively engage in humanitarian aid, is a terrorist organization. Hence, we will not allow them in. Hence, we will not abide by this particular order. So we should never allow Israel and the Israeli propagandists to spin this judgment as a win. I was disappointed after having read this. I saw this, and maybe it's a bad analogy, Allah forgive me, but I see this as our Hudaybiyah, or the Hudaybiyah of our times. And indeed, it is devastating to Israel at a number of levels.
SubhanAllah. We are coming to the hour and a half mark. There is one or two questions I want to put to you. Do you mind if I remove the screen?
No, of course, yeah, sure. You can remove the screen, yes.
I've got some questions here. First one is from Brother Mehdi. Will this month's ruling not act as a further scale and measure toward the reconvening next month? I mean, they could have deferred for several more months. Is this not part of the jurisprudence?
Yeah, look, I don't actually understand will this month's ruling not act as further scale and measure towards? Yeah, look, in relation to what the report basically states, what the judgment basically states is that they shall submit a report to the court to take effect, or on all the measures taken to give effect to this order. Meaning, for example, if you look at this order, what are the steps that Israel has taken to ensure that there are no commissions of genocide? What are the steps that they've taken to, for example, in paragraph 3, which stated that it has to punish the direct and public incitement to commit genocide in relation to members of the Palestinian group. This is directly in reference to the members of the Knesset. So Israel will have to report what steps it's taken in relation to that, because those statements were made by high-level Israeli officials. What are the steps it's taken? What are the steps that it's taken to, for example, ensure that destruction and preservation of evidence has basically occurred? What steps will it basically ensure or take that the military does not engage in whole-scale destruction of hospitals and schooling? So it's done so much of damage already. Now the court is going to say, well, you give us a report. What have you done to ensure that that is not going to take place and that is not happening? And what have you done to mitigate that? And what have you done essentially that to charge and take the necessary action against those that have basically incited and created this incitement by the genocidal statement? So They gave a month. South Africa asked in its particular original application that, and these are orders, the orders that are made are amended orders of what South Africa requested, because South Africa asked that the State of Israel shall submit a report to the court on all measures taken to give effect to this order within 1 week, as from the date of this order, and thereafter at such regular intervals as the court shall order, until a final decision on this case is rendered by the court. Meaning, every week, until the matter is finalized, you are to give this report. A typical example would be, like, for example, someone that's released on bail in a criminal matter that is charged, and every week, we've got provisions where once you're released on bail, you sometimes report to police stations on a weekly basis in terms of your whereabouts, confirming you're not a flight risk, confirming you're not a danger to the state witnesses, and so on. So South Africa was asking that this be done every week. The court, for some reason, maybe felt that this was unreasonable and held that it be done every month. Nevertheless, I think for what it's worth, a month is it's good enough. So I believe, the matter was heard on Friday. So within a month on Friday, Israel has to do a report. Now, there is a chance and there's a likelihood that Israel may not produce a report. And then, of course, we'll have to cross the bridge there, because the more and more that Israel does not comply with these particular orders, the more that Israel does not comply with these particular orders, the more that it's going to basically find itself being a complete international pariah. So it's going to basically say that this is the situation. And there was an assessment on this done by someone where somebody says the likelihood of Israel not basically fulfilling. Well, what can then happen is that states can then bring this up to the United Nations General Assembly. And then at the General Assembly, a resolution could be made. Alternatively, this could be taken to the Security Council. What eventually will happen is that Israel will become so isolated that there will be no way to turn. There will be basically nowhere to turn in relation to that particular aspect. So that's my take on this particular. I don't know what the future holds, but I do believe that they're on the back foot. Hamas doesn't have to give a report. Palestinians do. I'm sorry, Israel has to give a report. Hamas is not. Hamas, by the way, they were told to release the hostages, and I think Hamas may, but they are not even a party to the ICJ. So there's no order which is legally binding on Hamas. You can take them to the ICC, but not the ICJ in relation to that.
Yeah, the final question, which is quite interesting, actually, from Ridwan. Are countries allowed to leave the UN? I'm assuming to help fund the people in Gaza, or are they allowed to,
I didn't think about that. From what I understand, if you look at Article 6 of the UN Charter, if a member of the United Nations, which has violated principles contained in the Charter, he can be expelled from the organization by the General Assembly if that is recommended by the Security Council. Now, the Security Council is permanent members, which is your usual suspects: the US, UK, Russia, China, and France. So if there's a recommendation and you are in violation, then you could probably be expelled. If I stand subject to correction, I think Indonesia, and just check this up, Indonesia, I think during the time of General Suharto, apparently at some point withdrew from the UN. They were the first member to withdraw from the UN, because I think at that time they were at some point in confrontation with Malaysia, and they had announced that if Malaysia was to take a seat or permanent seat at the Security Council, they would then subsequently leave. And I think this was in the 60s. That was when they were ruled by the military dictatorship of General Suharto. I don't know what basically happened, but they threatened to leave that. Eventually, Malaysia never became part of the Security Council. There were no objections raised, and then eventually Indonesia removed its place. Basically, not on it got its place back. It resumed its position within the General Assembly. So basically, I think that there is some grounds for withdrawing from the United Nations, but I mean, on what basis? Meaning, the whole idea is of the UN Charter is that there needs to be some degree of the principle of sovereign equality of all member states of the UN, of the United Nations. So if you are basically withdrawing, you are saying that you are not on that ground. You're either superior to them, you're lower than them, you don't accept their treaties. Theoretically, it can be done. And theoretically, I think it can happen if a country basically violates certain particular provisions of the UN Charter. And what then can happen is that once it's in repeated violation, it's basically kicked out by the General Assembly upon the recognition of Security Council. I think that happened with the Taliban, if I'm not mistaken. When they came to power, when they were in, what was it, 2000 and I think 2002, around about that time of the after 9/11, the war, they were not a member of the General Assembly. I think they were not part of that. They were viewed as originally Afghanistan was, but I mean under the Taliban, I don't believe they were members of the General Assembly. I just need to find out. I don't know what the present position is. I just need to look that up in relation to that. But I believe at that stage they were not members of the General Assembly, and in relation to that. And I think the same thing with Iraq in 2003, and there were sanctions then subsequently imposed upon it, and for a certain time, I think Iran is, but I think I need to just double check that aspect. But I believe that there are grounds for expelling someone and somebody withdrawing from the UN General Assembly.
There's two more points I really want to make, which really kind of anger me sometimes when our Christian brethren in humanity make statements like this. Palestinians should be granted global citizenship, free reign status, and passports to order resettle anywhere they desire. The freak, you really baffle me sometimes, including Israel, and giving them vouchers or direct cash reimbursements, plus basically plus 250 pain per man. The freak. Yeah, he's a member to this channel.
Is his name the Freak?
Yeah.
With Neo from the Matrix. Is that his name, the Freak?
For them, it's a prophecy. All this is a prophecy for them. And I love to
is he a Christian? Is this guy a Christian?
Yeah.
It's strange that, Ilan Pape made the point that some of the strongest supporters of Israel are Christian Zionists, but these same Christians don't realize that within the state of Israel, Christians are treated like animals. I mean, you've got Orthodox rabbis spitting on American missionaries. You see that. You've seen that in plain sight. You see the way they are treated. I mean, some of these videos in the West Bank, not only in Gaza, but forget in Gaza and the West Bank, I'm talking about in Israel proper. If you look at Hebron, if you look at Jerusalem, if you look at occupied East Jerusalem, if you look at Haifa, all these major cities, if you look at Tel Aviv, you have numerous images and pictures. Look at Jerusalem, where they are spat on, they are abused, they are insulted. It's like a lot of these Christian Zionists are suckers for punishment. What they call this, they're like sadomasochists, this sadistic behavior, where you are just a sucker for punishment and you lap it up, despite how they abuse you, despite the fact that they describe your God as illegitimate, that Mary in the Talmudic literature was raped by a Roman soldier, and therefore they nickname him, they call him Ben Pandera, the son of Pandera. That's Jesus being raped by a Roman soldier. Mary was raped allegedly by a Roman soldier. That's the allegation. Although there's no historical, even within the historical Jewish literature, there's nothing that justifies that. But in their religious literature, the Talmudic material, this is how they are described. So it's amazing that Islam and Muslims, which honor Jesus, which place him in such a high rank, I mean, you view us as perpetual enemies. And it's amazing, even amongst a lot of Christian pastors and friends in South Africa, Indians, amongst certain blacks, despite the fact that there is a synchronicity and a correlation, the fact that, we recognize Christ as one of our own, as a mighty messenger of God, it's as if there's this kind of systematic indoctrination or brainwashing to the extent that Israel is right at all costs. I mean, I've got a group, maybe I'll add you one day, called the Open Debate Forum, which has a number of individuals on it. And I've got a Christian fanatic, who's worked with Muslims over the years and has had interaction with Muslims and so on, but incessantly, again and again, goes out of his way to defend the Israeli Defense Force. I mean, you see some of these pictures, and I think it's also a kind of a supremacist mentality, because in South Africa, for example,
yeah, it is.
You've got a lot of whites that are disgusted with the situation in South Africa in relation to maybe the service delivery, which we have a lot of problems with, and there is a number of factors for that. Like us, we experience load shedding. I don't know if you know, load shedding is where for intermittent periods for the day we have no lights because our grid is under so much of strain over the years, and we haven't basically fixed it up since apartheid. That's how we are sustaining pressure here. But a lot of these, supremacists have no shame in supporting Israel. And I think it's because of the fact that Israel in reality is not just a Jewish state, but it's a white settler colonial colony in the Middle East. It's you couldn't make this up, that you've got an Australian, you've got a European, you've got a Russian, you've got a French, you've got an American, you've got someone that may be coming from Ethiopia, living in Israel as Israelis, and they all claim to be Middle Eastern Semites.
Yeah,
that's the inversion of reality. So this is the situation at the end of the day, pertaining to that. And this is just, we've scratched the surface on the judgment. Again, I will send you the link of the judgment. Maybe you can upload this below the YouTube channel of this particular stream, and then people can download and read the judgment for themselves. And not be so, what's the word? The word, so, I wouldn't say apathetic or so despondent. Don't be despondent. That's my point. Don't be despondent. Because Israel has, if Hamas gave, as one of your doctors in the UK that's now been suspended, I saw him on one of your shows, Abdul Wahid, he says Hamas gave Israel a punch on the nose on October 7th. Well, I can tell you, on the 11th of December, South Africa gave Israel a legal punch on the nose and a knockout blow. So Hamas didn't deliver the knockout blow. We delivered the legal knockout blow. Inshallah, we'll see how far this goes.
Me personally, I can't see the IDF winning the war. I really can't.
No.
It's gonna be their soldiers are ill-trained. They're young. They're immature. They've got no combat experience. No. They're naive. A lot of them are like TikTok. Kind of like people. Yeah, they like to post stuff.
TikTok selfie posters. I mean, I see that all the time. It's
shocking.
Like a game for them. I don't think see they've never had this kind of conflict before. Hamas has drawn them in. So their own military leaders are saying that they've got no combat experience.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry about that. Go ahead, brother.
No. This is what I said from day one, that Hamas's idea was to get into a proper ground war, like in Vietnam. What happened to to the Americans and other places around the world? Once you get into a guerrilla warfare, you are gonna struggle. If IDF never had aeroplanes and air power, they would never come close in winning the war. And this is the only difference right now. And of course, what's happening in the sea right now with the Houthis, and what's happened in Iraq with a couple of American soldiers dying, you can see the spread. And what baffles me, brothers and sisters, and our beloved guest Yusuf, is that how the Western governments try to blame everything onto the Middle Eastern countries, saying that they're the ones who started it. But in reality, why did you put your battleships in that location? To protect Israel, to protect the military, the armor, to coming into the ports. That's why you put if you didn't want to get involved in the war, why send your battleships there? Why send your boats there? It didn't make any sense for me. And people like George Galloway is very big here in the UK, and his shows are very beneficial. And he explains it, and he tells you. And Scott Ritter is another one. I don't know if you heard about Scott Ritter. He's
yes, I know Scott Ritter, absolutely.
Very, very good information. Where
the UN weapons. In fact, I think about the Houthis. I mean, I listened particularly to the one for the discussion, and I urge people to listen. It's on the Katie Halper show. It was Norman Finkelstein and Craig Mukaiber. And Finkelstein I think Finkelstein made the point, and I was listening to that in this morning, that if there was anyone that he would give the Nobel Peace Prize to in relation to the conflict, he would give it to the Houthis. He sees the Houthis as freedom fighters, as people of resistance. And there was a phenomenal interview by a lady, and I hadn't seen her for a number of years. I used to see when I was much younger, there was a show on your program called The Big Questions by Nick Robinson. The name is Dr. Miriam Francois Serra. Dr. Miriam Francois. She was being interviewed on Sky News. I don't know if you've seen that interview, Brother Mohammed. And she's totally demolished both the guests on the program. I'll send you the link where she's been questioned about the billions of dollars being lost as a result of the Houthis in some dinghies attacking. And she states that she apologizes for the Amazon gifts packs not coming on time. But in a time of genocide, you have the kind of moral audacity to question and raise that. And the Sky News host asked her, don't you think this is some kind of branding or positive branding of the Houthis? So her response was, well, then end the ceasefire if you want to stop the positive branding. I mean, it was such a phenomenal interview that it was only 3 minutes. They had to shut it down because she held them by the throat. And I highly recommend them viewing it. It's a pity I haven't seen her on the TV stations for a long time, but I believe she was at the Oxford Center for Islamic Studies, and she was quite a regular on some of the programs like The Big Question and in debates that I've seen in the past. I hadn't seen her.
So Brother Ismail, final question from me, and I really want you to be honest with this. What do you think the outcome will be for the IDF? Do you think they'll prolong the war? Because what's his name again? The Prime Minister
Netanyahu.
He knows that once the war is over, he's going to be basically kicked out or possibly sent to jail. Do you think he'll prolong the war or expand the war to different countries so he has more time to rule?
Well, it's difficult to make predictions, but if you were to ask me on October 7th, or at least a week or 2 weeks after that, when we saw this intense bombing, and back then it was about 2,000 or 3,000 Palestinians that had been massacred by Israel, I would have told you, well, look, it was going to probably go on till October, end of November, maybe early December. And by Christmas, people were predicting that things were going to end. Man. That's what a lot of commentators were saying, that, look, things were going to ease out. But then we realized that on Christmas Eve, there were massacres taking place, like the bombing of that refugee camp, not the Jabalia refugee camp. There was another refugee camp. There's so many refugee camps that are being bombed, but in this particular one, Israel made the claim that they made a mistake. So they killed people, and this time around, they didn't say they were Hamas members there. They said they miscalculated and they made a mistake. And then you had the outrage, which was published by Al Jazeera immediately after Christmas Day, on the shooting at the Abu Ghazala, the Shadi Abu Ghazala school. And then, of course, we had the story of the ladies in the churches. So as opposed to kind of a cessation of the violence, you saw somehow or the other, for some reason, an increase in the violence at the height of Christmas. And that's why, Christmas was shut down in Gaza by a lot of the churches, Reverend Isaac Munter. So for all intents and purposes, from Netanyahu's perspective, this is one clearly of political survival. If the war ends, he's gone. And also the other point is that they will never win against Hamas. This is the point. Ideologically, they will not win. they're losing the war from a guerrilla point. I see videos regularly of individual men coming, standing in front of a tank and blowing it up. I mean, these are brave soldiers that are doing that, from either Hamas fighters or other resistance fighters, the Palestinian resistance. They are bold, they are courageous, and they are targeting the military. And the military are doing, you see these tanks going, and these tanks are being attacked. So they are losing the guerrilla warfare. But Netanyahu has to continue, because if he stops now, what happens? He's left with 30,000, maybe more, 50, 60,000 innocent men, women, and children dead, possibly his own hostages killed. The hostages are not back, and Israel has achieved nothing, and Hamas is still around. So they want it to be as perpetual as possible. I think there will have to come a time when enough will be enough, and I don't know where it's heading, but I think that with what's happened with the Houthis, with what's happened with the South African application at this juncture, it's certainly upped the pressure. With the protests globally around the world, it's up the pressure. And the more Israel continues, right now it's lost its support amongst those that were initially sympathetic in relation to October 7th. But I'm saying that its own allies, there will come a time that its own allies, the US and the United Kingdom, will have to say, stop, we can't go on with this, because it's so blatant, so apparent. And more and more people will basically be dying as and when the particular war continues. So I think it's reached it's already reached a crescendo for Israel. And now, once you reach a crescendo, there's just one way: you're going down. And Israel is self-destructing. It's self-destructing in every level. Militarily, it's self-destructing because it's losing the guerrilla war. Ideologically, it's losing the battle. From a public relations point of view, Israel has become its own biggest public relations disaster. I mean, look at it at every level. The traditional mainstream media outlets like CNN and BBC are no longer parroting and channeling the pro-Israeli news. I mean, this was unheard of. When did you ever hear the New York Times giving a critical assessment on Israel? Yes, after the South African application, they started wanting to resurrect the stories of rape and the massacres and what happened on October 7th. But things have changed. I really believe things have changed. And in the global world opinion, Israel will never be the same. The IPCI, the Islamic Propagation Center, during the height of Ahmadiyya, he wrote a phenomenal book. I don't have it in front of me. It was called Arabs and Israel: Conflict and Conciliation. But
I remember the book.
He gave, and he circulated it en masse in London. He had a fantastic brother. I don't know if he's ever still around. Brother Shamshad Khan from Birmingham. He ran a organization called Islamic Vision UK in Birmingham.
Country Road. I know very well.
Shamshad Khan. And one of the books was Publish It Not, and the other one was A Dare to Speak Out. And back then, what the authors of the book, which was being produced and reproduced and circulated by the IPCC, stated that in the world of public opinion, this is back then, and we're talking about 88, 89 during the first Intifada, he stated it is practically impossible to get any kind of mainstream news outlet, any view on the Palestinian plight and the Palestinian crisis. So Ahmadiyya was resorting to paid adverts in the South African newspapers back then, in the height of apartheid, and the newspapers were refusing the publication of his ads. That's 1989. We're now in 2024. In 2024, your own propagandists, your own corporate media powerhouses are now, in fact, speaking out against what is happening. I mean, I see there being a significant shift. Yes, there is still propaganda out there in favor of Israel by the corporate media, but I certainly see and witness a kind of a pattern of change. And I mean, you get these kind of fanatical news outlets like Talk TV. Nobody bothers about them. But mainstream Sky News, BBC, which was traditionally, historically biased in favor of Israel, CNN, favor of Israel, New York Times, the MSNBC, they're now asking questions that were never asked before.
Sorry, Yusuf, this is the final question from Brother Mehdi. I don't know if you can see it on the screen.
Yeah, I see that. Will the interim ICJ ruling not facilitate cases being brought to the ICC as well? Yes, indeed. absolutely. And I may add, not just simply to the ICC, there's a case being brought against Israel to the ICJ in February. Let me just, who was that country? ICJ case against Israel.
Was it Malaysia or Indonesia?
Malaysia, I think Malaysia. I think it was
Malaysia.
in Malaysia. Let me just see, which country was it? Yeah, Malaysia. I think Malaysia basically is bringing a case against Israel on the issue of apartheid. I mean, one must recall that there was a famous Goldstone report, again, a South African judge and a self-professed liberal Zionist, Judge Richard Goldstone. He produced a report in 2010 which totally damaged Israel in relation to the fact that Israel was engaging openly in acts of apartheid. It was an apartheid state. He later rescinded that report, and his credibility was obviously lost in the long term. But the initial report damaged Israel very badly. So there is a case being brought against Israel at the ICJ. I think that's going to be probably heard in February. And I think Turkey, if I'm not mistaken, Turkey. Let me just check which is the other. There was a second country. There's a second country. I can't recall which is the other country that's also bringing. So there's a number of countries that are basically coming forth. And certainly the ICC is not a body of the UN. You see, the ICC is an international criminal court. It's not unlike the ICJ. It operates. The ICJ operates as an extension of the United Nations. The ICC is separate from the United Nations. So also it can try non-state actors. It can try individual leaders that can be brought, or individual leaders of terrorist groups and outfits for war crimes, for crimes against humanity, all of that. So this is the situation. So there's certainly more going to be coming out. And essentially this is the end all for Israel. They're going to be facing the pressure.
Yeah, definitely. We've got like a Christian backstage. I think he wants to ask some questions, but it's going over the 2-hour mark. So maybe, it's been a long day for both of us here. So next time
we have an earlier time period, then possibly we could accommodate him.
Yeah, hopefully we can do something this weekend, maybe Saturday or something like that. Maybe we can have a follow-up where we can have like an open. Sorry, go on, Yusuf.
Yeah, sure. We can have a follow-up this Saturday or this weekend. Let's see how things pan out.
I really want to get some of these Christians, and I want to get their mindset. I think, they love the Jews so much is due to the fact that, of course, they believe that their God was a Jew. So they've got to somehow have some type of affection and empathy for the Jewish people. And I just find it, even though they spit at you, kick you, push you around, but you still want to hug them and kiss them. Is this like turn the other cheek? Come on, guys. It's just like, subhanallah. It's really worrying. Brother Yusuf, I'm sorry about that little monologue.
No, that's fine. That's fine. It's just the fact that a lot of these Christian, evangelical Christian support for Zionism, for Israel, is because of the fact that it's a herald leading up to Armageddon, which they all want, which is a bloody war. What Christian Zionism is? Believe for the second coming of Christ.
Jesus is the Prince of Peace. Ain't Jesus the Prince of Peace? But all you want is war and destruction. Wake up, guys! It's just like
you see what they believe is that the return of the Jewish people to its biblical homeland in Israel will be a fulfillment of biblical prophecy, and it's necessary for Jesus to come and return to earth, and then the Armageddon. But what they don't also tell you is that Jesus, when he comes, will be killing his enemies, which would mean those Jews that reject him will be murdered and massacred. So is that not anti-Semitic?
He would even kill the Christians because they were saying, "We did this in your name. We did it for you." And he said, "Depart from me, you evildoers, you lawless people." And he was the same. He's doing the same thing to the Christians.
That's a topic on its own. We must one day talk about Christian Zionism and why. That the support for Israel is not a recent development. It comes right up to the 1880s. There's a person called William Heckler. He formed a committee of Christian Zionists in the 1800s, and he helped move Russian Jewish refugees to Palestine after a series of pogroms. He wrote a book called I think it's The Restoration of the Jews to Palestine, not to Israel, to Palestine, because there was no Israel as a nation. The Restoration of the Jews to Palestine according to the prophets. I haven't read the entire book. I'm going to ask my brother Shafia Chowdhury, the one who's from the UK that always sends me libraries and libraries of material to get a copy of that. But that's a topic on its own. Why the Christian fanatics baselessly support Israel? It's something that we need to look at and certainly consider and remove the cobwebs.
Yeah, we do that, inshallah, pretty soon. So it has been nearly 2 hours now. I really appreciate your time. There is a time difference between UK and South Africa. I think it's 2 hours.
It's 11 o'clock now, 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah, so, okay, well, maybe next time we'd like to talk about the deity of Christ. Yeah, if you want to leave your email backstage, and I can contact you via email, Servant of Christ, leave your email and I'll get back to you. That'll be great. So brothers and sisters, thank you for watching. Brother Yusuf, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. I've been learning a lot, and the way you unpack everything, it's amazing. But I really appreciate it. Any final words from you before we end the show?
Well, I want to thank you, Brother Muhammad, for giving this opportunity to be on your platform. And I see it's on 2 other platforms. It's on Consider Islam TV as well. So any of the material, the viewers out there who want some of the material that we have, I will happily give it to Brother Muhammad, and he can then share it in the YouTube video once a stream is already up and uploaded. And study the material. Don't be despondent. Don't be disheartened. We should not let Israel spin this recent judgment as a victory. It's not a victory for them. It's a loss for them. And see this, as I stated, as al-Hudaybiyah, and certainly Hudaybiyah is described in the Quran as a manifest victory. So certainly Israel's on trial for mass murder for the first time in human history, and this will be going on for a number of years. But they will be facing the pressure, and we should up the pressure. We should continue the pressure and let them feel the full force of our might, of global public opinion, of Islam, of ourselves as Muslims, and certainly other like-minded Jews and Christians out there who support the Palestinian cause.
Excellent. I just want to remind you, brothers and sisters, tomorrow we've got this English stream of Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, the false prophet. That's tomorrow, 8 o'clock. And then on Wednesday, 7 p.m. in Arabic, again, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, the false prophet. And then, of course, Saturdays, we have a regular topic of Is Jesus the Only True God? That's 9 p.m. UK time. So, brothers and sisters, please subscribe and like and share, so you'll get notifications of future streams. So thank you once again for watching. I'd like to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for giving me this opportunity again to sit in front of our beloved brother Yusuf. And barakallah feekum to all the brothers and sisters for tuning in. This is your brother Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.